Hello, I'm Kristen from Kristen Cain Style. Welcome. I help women create wardrobes they really love wearing, and I teach them that it doesn't have to be complicated or expensive to do so. So today I'm going to chat about just something I've been thinking about lately. Maybe it's the sort of vintage sweater that I have on that has reminded me the last few times I wore it. But I want to talk about 5 wardrobe lessons that we could take away from our great-grandmothers, or maybe even further back than that, but I'm going to call it great-grandmothers. So 5 wardrobe lessons that we could take from our grandmothers or great-grandmothers, depending on our age. So number 1, first lesson to take away from our grandmothers is quality. Buy quality clothing. They didn't really have a choice because there wasn't really the same kind of fast fashion back then. And so all pieces were well made, or they made them themselves, which made them well made, whether they knit the sweater or a friend or neighbor knit the sweater, whether they made the skirt, made the blouse. They had a more hands-on craftsperson idea around clothing. And so they bought quality. And when you buy quality, it lasts longer, it looks better. So I think the number 1 takeaway, if we want to have sort of a little wardrobe lesson from our great-grandmothers, is to buy quality. Number 2, second thing would be to shop less. They didn't shop like we do. They didn't have access to the immense amount of merchandise that we now have access to. And I think that was a good thing, probably. They had some choices, but the Sears and Roebuck's catalog, or the JCPenney's catalog, or Bonwit Teller, or whatever the level of affluence was for our grandmothers, wherever they were shopping, even if it was a resale store or the neighborhood thrift store, kind of the hospital thrift or that sort of thing, they were buying less. They bought what they needed, and they wore it, until it needed to be mended, and then they mended it, and they kept wearing it, and then they handed it down. So the buying quality and the shopping less, I think, kind of go hand in hand. If we buy better pieces, we need to shop less. So they bought quality, they shopped less. The third lesson would be natural fibers. They, again, didn't have all the man-made fibers that we have now. And I feel like if we could get back to the cottons and the wools and the cashmeres and the silks, there's something really beautiful and luxurious about those fabrics. Now, I don't wear wool, so I'm happy to have an acrylic sweater now and then, but I do love cashmere and cotton. And there's just something really nice, I think, about the way a natural fiber feels versus a man-made or a synthetic. They had clothing that was made of natural fibers, and I think that elevated their look without really trying in a whole lot of other ways. Number 4, they dressed authentically. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have social media. They dressed more in keeping with who they were. There was an alignment there, I think, where they weren't trying to, yes, they might have been comparing themselves to the women in their bridge group or to their neighbors or the ladies at church, but they weren't comparing themselves to the entire planet, to every woman on the entire planet via a little square on social media. So there was an authenticity because they had fewer pieces to choose from. They chose what they loved, and they didn't get hung up on the, how do I compare? Should I be wearing that because so-and-so is wearing that? And I think that leads to the 5th way that I think our grandmothers and great-grandmothers can help us build a wardrobe we love, is that they wore what's classic because, again, they didn't have another choice. There was not the attention or the depth of the crazy trends. That doesn't mean that there weren't things that were a little outlandish for their time. And I'm sure they kind of, raised their eyebrows at, oh my goodness, look at her in that mini skirt or whatever the case was. But they dressed in a more classic, timeless, elegant way. There was a simplicity to the way that they dressed, whether it was a black sweater and a strand of pearls or a white blouse and, a pretty scarf. There was something chic about just the timeless, classic pieces that they chose and the way that they put them together. And then not really, I guess it could be one of the top 5 that now would make it the top 6 reasons why I think we should look to our grandmothers for, just incredible wardrobe tips. And that is, they dressed for the life they had. They didn't buy things that were for some future life or some fantasy life that they didn't actually live. They had functional clothing. They had clothing that was not only attractive, that they enjoyed wearing, that was well made, quality clothing, but it fit the life that they lived. If they lived on a farm, they wore what worked. And if we go all the way back, beyond the grandmothers and great grandmothers to sort of, Little House on the Prairie and Laura Ingalls, big fan, or to Heidi in the Alps, also a big fan. They wore skirts and dresses with layers underneath and boots, and they looked amazing. And while that isn't the style that I choose to adopt right now, it shows us that a woman can work in the field wearing a skirt. We had a neighbor and dear friend years ago who would come home from work in her amazing outfit, and she would hop on their riding lawnmower and she would cut their grass, and she still looked chic and fabulous. She'd put on a sun hat. They bought clothing. The grandmothers, that is, they bought clothing that worked for the life they actually lived. And I think so many of us, myself included, kind of buy these pieces thinking that it will work for some future life or it is for some fantasy life, when then it hangs in our closet because I don't actually have a villa in Mexico where I can wear all these flowy caftans and kimonos. And so I think there's something to be said for paying attention to how they did it in the olden days, where they bought clothing and wore clothing that really suited the life that they lived. So that's just my kind of 2 cents. As I said, I have sort of a vintage sweater that Greta found on, my daughter Greta found on Poshmark and then was finished with, and I snatched it from her because I thought it was too good to let go. And it's just kind of made me a little bit nostalgic and kind of look back at what our grandmothers did differently and how in pictures they all managed to look pretty timeless and amazing, really, that generation, that era. And I think, those are some of the reasons. They only bought quality. They shopped less because they had less access to all the stuff that we have now. They bought natural fibers and they dressed authentically, and their style was more classic and timeless. There wasn't all the trend setting, it seems, that we have now. And they dressed for the life that they actually lived. So their clothing actually supported the life that they were living. And I think there's something super beautiful and chic about that. And I plan to take that forward in my own life and try to remember that when I'm shopping and getting dressed, that I want more of that. I'm not ready to be a grandmother yet, though. I'll tie that in there. Not time yet, but someday. If you have a comment or a question, drop it into the space below and I will be sure to answer. I am here usually every Friday, but don't hold me to it. So feel free to like and subscribe to this video or to my channel, like the video and share it with anybody who you think might appreciate it, your grandmother included. And I also do a Instagram Live every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. And it's a Q&A, style Q&A, all things style. And so you can submit your question in advance by going to my Instagram at Kristen Cain Style and dropping it in the DMs, and I'll get to it on the next Tuesday. Or you can show up live, which would be even better, and ask me live, and I will answer it then. That's all for today. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Take care.